Spread the fire. Welcome to the SMWX show. I am Lukhona Mnguni, of course, giving rolling commentary here from time to time as we get closer and closer to the elections of 29 May 2024. Today, I'm talking to you about, can the ANC lose elections in the Gauteng province? It's an important question because it introduces a new dynamic, if it were to happen, in the life of politics in the Gauteng province. Now, let's think carefully about the importance of the province of Gauteng, usually known as the economic hub of South Africa. Dare I say, to an extent, the economic hub was one of the economic key centers in the continent of Africa. It is a place where some like to call it where dreams come true. And that is why, out of all the provinces in the country, you often see the influx of people to Gauteng, coming here to seek work, coming here to seek opportunities, coming here to seek igolide, as it was. I mean, this is a province, one of the provinces with clan names, as it were, or praise names. When people say, Ndisaya kwandonga ziyaduma, kwanyama ipheli kuphela izinyo lendoda. I mean, it's really a place of plenty. Kwanyama ipheli kuphela izinyo lendoda. Or should we say, it used to be a place of plenty. And that is Gauteng province. Kuthiwe we are eJozi, the city of gold. Of course, there isn't much gold left, at least in the Witwatersrand basin. There are all the hollow hallways of, mining underneath the belly of the city that unfortunately cause many problematic things, from acid mine drainage to some of the seismic tremors that we get to feel from time to time. Some people even fear that one day this city of Johannesburg could just swallow itself because of the mining activity that has happened beneath the soil for centuries on end. But this is not about the glory of Gauteng. Or maybe it is a tale of the glory of Gauteng gone wrong, but it has implications for politics. People want those opportunities they come to Gauteng for. People want that freedom, economic freedom, they come to Gauteng and chase, so that they could live a good, healthy life, so that they can feed their families, and so that they can send money home. However, in these 30 years of our democracy, Gauteng has seen better days than it does today. Much has collapsed about this province. Much has shrunk about the opportunities in this province. And much has been eaten away in the soul of this province, a soul of this province which generated much creativity. I mean, you can think about the creative sectors that have, sprung up in this Gauteng province. I mean, you can think about the iconic neighborhoods that people used to settle on with pride. Neighborhoods like Yeoville, where many artists, musicians, upcoming black middle class people used to occupy. If you drove to Yeoville today, it is a shadow or probably a ghost of its former self. I don't count, the collapse of the many CBDs, Ekhuruleni, Kempton Park, Johannesburg, and, sections of Tshwane, Pretoria. So it begs the question, is the current government in a good footing to come back with a decisive majority after the 29th of May, 2024. I think the proof is in the campaign trail itself. There is no doubt that the African National Congress, the ANC, is mounting a battle for its dear survival. And this battle is seen at how it has been rolling out a very disciplined campaign focused on the ANC, focused on ANC supporters, focused on getting them excited about the ANC, and focused on almost pleading with them, please keep us in power. I liked a statement because they've been pulling everyone out, If you thought politicians have retired or they've lost interest, but the prospect of seeing the ANC lose power has energized even some of its veterans. And a person who knows how important this province is for the ANC to win the elections nationally is none other than the former Gauteng Premier, Tshwane himself. He came out recently to join the campaign trail. Don't ask me about the white spirit boys, trust and whatever something and 100 trillion rands that he said, the current government led by his comrade President Ramaphosa is starving all of us South Africans. We could be having so much money and pay each one of us out of poverty, out of debt and into prosperity. Don't ask me about those things. He doesn't want to be asked about those things. All he's saying is, and I thought his statements, or his statement rather, was an important reflection of where the ANC finds itself. He said, when your house is on fire, you don't ask who started the fire, how did the fire happen, No, you take a bucket and you hoy water and you go in there and you douse the fire. That's what he said. And that's what he's come out to do. That, he says, doesn't mean he's no longer unhappy about some of the things that have gone wrong in the ANC. That doesn't mean he doesn't see the need for reform within the ANC. But now the house is on fire. And I think that's a correct analogy. The question really going into this election is whether or not the ANC can put that fire out in this province of Gauteng. I will give a verdict of what I think might happen after the 29th of May here in Gauteng. But there are a few important considerations. And a lot of people have focused their attention talking about the possible coalition at a national government level. But not enough time has been spent talking about the coalition possibility in Gauteng, or at least in terms of focusing. It's taken for granted by many that there will be a coalition government in Gauteng. But what are the implications of that? And some of the questions we have to ask. One, do we have enough mature politicians in the province of Gauteng? When we look at the menu of potential premier candidates, do we think we have enough stock of quality politicians? I mean, there has been a flurry of people declared as, premier candidates. Even the UDM has seen an opportunity in Gauteng, and it has said, Mthunzi Mdwaba, get in the fight for the premiership of Gauteng. The Patriotic Alliance has said, Kenny Kunene, there is an opportunity, get in there. The Democratic Alliance has backed Solim Simanga to say, you have a chance. Build One South Africa with Musi Maimane has chosen Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster to take the lead on their campaign for Premier of Gauteng. Rise Mzansi has said, Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, you have an opportunity at this thing. The ANC has continued to back Panyaza Lesufi to say, we are getting a decisive victory and you will come back. The EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, have said, Buyiseni Ndlozi, get in there. And by the way, the EFF hardly, give premier candidates before an election, at least not in the last 2 elections, but in this election, because there is an opportunity. Who have I forgotten? Patriotic Alliance, Kenny Gunene. I think I've mentioned him already. But the point really is, there are so many political parties that are seeing the opportunity. Actually, they say, Funzi Ngobeni. They are saying, go fix Gauteng. And they've got all these matter of slogans. I've forgotten the Freedom Front Plus candidate, top of my mind. But they've also put out a candidate. That tells you there is opportunity being seen by a lot of people in this election in Gauteng. Now, elections are a game of numbers. How you arrive at whether or not there will potentially be a coalition, you've got to look at the numbers. What we know the numbers are telling us is that the ANC has lost control of all 3 metropolitan municipalities in Gauteng: Ekhuruleni, Tshwane, Johannesburg. Leave the local municipalities. But focus on the metros, because over 75% of your registered voters in Gauteng are in the 3 metros. So Gauteng is decided by the metros. And if you don't have a strong hold and footing in the metros, you are in trouble. And because Gauteng is highly urbanized, but it's also geographically smaller, it is highly likely to be a very competitive province, because the political actors find it easy to move from Mpofu-Walsh to Hammanskraal. They find it easy to campaign from Tembisa to Heidelberg. And that's because the geography of the province is small. And that's why many political parties, perhaps maybe the ANC, not the ANC, but many political parties tend to have a bulk share of their support base in Gauteng. And it's super competitive. You just have to drive along the M1 between Johannesburg and Pretoria and see the poster war that is going on. And new posters are still emerging along the M1, because that's where bumper-to-bumper traffic hits the residents of this province as they drive to work or drive back from work to home or places of entertainment in some instances. Some are in minibus, taxis, buses along that route, trekking home, looking for those opportunities, looking for work, and so on. And this competitiveness around Gauteng has been made possible by the loss of the ANC of the 3 metros. And that tells us there is a possibility for the ANC to lose a majority in Gauteng. By the way, the ANC in 2019 got its majority just by the thread, 50.4%, somewhere there. They couldn't touch 51%. That tells you the ANC is vulnerable in Gauteng. And in that 2019 election, there are parties who were not there that have now since been born and are contesting and competing quite strongly in Gauteng. I mean, even in 2019, many people don't know this. The Patriotic Alliance actually stood on the national ballot, but it didn't find resonance with the electorate. I mean, on the national ballot, it couldn't even get 10,000 votes. It got well below that. However, this time around, we are dealing with a different Patriotic Alliance, more emboldened Patriotic Alliance. It has seats in municipalities. It has an MMC in the city of Johannesburg in its deputy president, Kenny Gunene, who is their premier candidate. There are newer formations that are contesting tightly in Gauteng. I mean, one just recently launched its manifesto, Big SA, Basic Income Grant South Africa. There's BOSA, there's Rise Mzansi. Action SA was not on the ballot in 2019. Action SA is on the ballot this year. So Gauteng is tightly contested. And we see this in the footprint of the campaigns. There are many other parties on the ballot. But let's tell the truth. Those parties are important, but in terms of their campaigns, they have not made themselves as visible as some of these parties that I've just mentioned. Or maybe they are campaigning in their small corners where they think they've got pockets of support. But this province is the biggest story, irrespective of what happens nationally. I believe that the Gauteng province is the biggest story of this 2024 election, because for the first time, is this me rolling out now what I think will happen? Wait. For the first time, I think the streets of Gauteng have never seen an ANC, probably since 2016, that fights so hard for dear life. Because what it means is that if the ANC dips below 50%, it has to share the spoils. Even if they retain the premiership, there'll be that one MEC who has to make space for an opposition party MEC. There may be 2, 3, 4. It depends on the scale of the decline. The decline of the ANC in Gauteng has been quite telling, showing. And immediately after the 2016 local government elections, the ANC became vulnerable in Gauteng. And when the ANC couldn't hold at least to Ekhuruleni's share of the vote it had, and it collapsed there, my view is that the ANC became even much more vulnerable in Gauteng. Therefore, as the people of Gauteng head towards the polls, the ANC really has to reconnect with its base. I remember seated at the National Results Operations Center with some of the ANC fellows at the time in 2019. And we were sitting there. It must have been about 10 p.m., 11 p.m. It's quite addictive there. You don't want to leave as you watch those leaderboards and see the maneuvers happening on the floor and how people are talking to one another. And one ANC fellow said, you know, it's never been this time after the votes have started coming in and we've not hit 2 million votes in Gauteng. And I thought that was quite telling because I could see the fright on his face. He was quite frightened by the possibility that the ANC might not make it to 2 million votes in Gauteng. And that may just mean an ANC at 49.5%. Luckily, they managed, through the skin of the thread, to make it through. But I don't think the ANC is going to be that lucky this time around in Gauteng. I know some of my friends there, when we chat, banter, they say, Nguni, we've never been this united before. And I must agree, their campaign is quite uniting. It's uniting factions. It's what classically we call closing ranks. The ANC is closing ranks. It's really coming out, rolling out big guns, rolling out cultural, activists. I mean, I saw Ntate Sipho Hot Sticks Mabuza, on the campaign trail. They fetched, who would have thought, the cat, Madoda, Didi Mabuza, the former deputy president of the country, would be fetched all the way from Mpumalanga to campaign in the streets of Gauteng. And that's because the ANC is really trying to re-energize its base. It has a lot in terms of its base. That must not be taken away from it. The ANC has a lot of what we might call lapsed voters. So people who used to vote for the ANC and then stopped. But many of them did not make the transition to vote for different parties. They didn't make the transition to look for a new political home that they can support. What they did is they stayed at home. And this is true of the analysis that has been made over the last local government elections of 2016 and 2021. If the ANC could reconnect with that base, energize it back to voting, then I'm telling you, the game is on in Gauteng and opposition will really have to up its ante. Because what has been clear, perhaps outside of the economic freedom fighters, is that a lot of opposition parties are unable to tap into the core base of ANC voters, particularly in areas such as Soweto, northern townships of Tshwane, pockets of Tembisa and so on, Alex. Those are core bases of the ANC. And they've got significant populations. And so for as long as the opposition is not managing to penetrate, convince, and send its message to those bases to convert the ANC voters, lapsed voters, into becoming voters for them, then the ANC still has a good chance. And in that, it may just hang on closer to the 50% it got in 2019. At some point, I'm sure the ANC itself knows this, because the ANC, by the way, does research, does its own internal polling. At some point, it really looked like the ANC would hold off at about 36, 37% in Gauteng. But with the election campaign that they are mounting, former presidents, besides that other former president, you know that one, not so keen on being part of saving the ANC with the voters, but more of drowning the ANC with the voters. But that former president alone aside, and look at other former presidents. Former President Mbeki, Mhlante. Look at former Deputy President Mlambo Ngcuka. Tokyo Sexwaleza spoke about him. And many others that are being rolled out to come and campaign, because in my mind, I think the ANC understands that even if it were to hold a majority government nationally, losing its majority in Gauteng will weaken the ANC and will probably prove a new era of transition where the ANC does not have complete grip on the levers of economic power. Now, I know you probably are asking, does the ANC deserve to retain its grip on the levers of the economic hub and economic power that is Gauteng? Well, the indicators, as I have said earlier, of the collapse of the cities, of the loss of majority in the metropolitan cities, tells us that the electorate itself is beginning to shift away from the ANC out of dissatisfaction, out of no longer being able to find work, opportunities, and comfort and hustle and bustle in the province of Gauteng. But on the 29th of May, starting on the 27th of May, when the special voting happens and the home visits happen, it will be telling whether or not the residents of Gauteng are still keen to give the ANC one last chance, or maybe many more chances. But if you see how the campaign is driven by the ANC, it's almost like they're saying, one last chance and we promise we will not mess up again. Will that message resonate with voters? Will that message carry with voters? I don't know. Because guess what? When people are in that voting booth and they have to make choices, at times they go in that voting booth undecided, really unhappy and despondent with the incumbent government. But when they look at the menu and they watch the choices before them, they then say, there isn't one choice that I am comfortable with to replace the ANC with. Because at times, voters of the ANC and supporters of the ANC want something that is not antagonistic to the ANC. Because the ANC to them is cultural heritage, no longer a political party. I think I've said this to Sizwe before on this platform. But the ANC has transcended being a political party, which many other political parties still are. The ANC is a cultural institution. It's a place where its supporters and voters go for some soul regeneration when they think about the contribution of the ANC and how far it has come. After all, we are talking about an over a century-old political party. So the detachment that sometimes people expect of voters of the ANC from the ANC is actually, quite frankly speaking, to a degree, I would say, unjustified. It absents how psychologically, but also heartily embedded the ANC is in many people. A vote against the ANC is too painful a task for some people. And that is exactly what I think the ANC is touching at its heartstrings. But there's also another dimension. The ANC is also succeeding in telling its voter base that unless you want to live with another chaos of coalitions in Tshwane, in Ekhuruleni, in the city of Johannesburg, then by all means vote the ANC out. But if you want a Gauteng that still has some semblance of functionality, then vote for the ANC. That's the message of the ANC. And it's resonating. And it seems the opposition doesn't have a counter message to that message of the ANC to reassure the voters that a coalition is not a bad thing for the province of Gauteng. But of course, for them to reassure the voters, it's incumbent on the opposition to demonstrate what it is they are willing to do differently to ensure that there isn't a chaotic, fragile, unstable coalition at a provincial level in Gauteng. So these are the competing interests and narratives. But one may ask, on the other hand, what has stability of an ANC majority in Gauteng achieved for the people of Gauteng? Or it has achieved ease of access to opportunity, patronage, resources to the incumbents without having to deal with coalition partners. And really, that's what the choice is for the voters. And to then ask, of these opposition parties in Gauteng, which ones demonstrate some sense of, stability, sobriety, maturity, and people-centeredness in their politics? Then maybe if those parties get given a sizable share of the votes, they could hold a stable coalition, whether in partnership with the ANC or out of partnership with the ANC. Because I know we talk a lot about, and sometimes we say these things because we're being influenced by politicians who are telling us this doomsday, that doomsday, this. There may well be a possibility that there is no possible stable coalition in Gauteng without the ANC in that coalition. And so when we talk about stability, we've got to think about other things. If the ANC is entirely outside of government and has no responsibility to govern, what could some of its elements do in society as a shock retaliation to no longer seeing the ANC in government? And therefore, what could be a stabilizing factor? Is it to annihilate the ANC, alienate the ANC from government, or is it to bring it into government? we've got to think about what stability means for this province because of its strategic nature. Not only because it's the province with the biggest share of the population, but it's the province with the biggest responsibility for one, the strengthening of this economy, the growing of this economy, the creation of jobs, the ending of violence, and all those other things. A Gauteng that doesn't work has massive knock-on effects to a South Africa that doesn't work. So, could the ANC lose its majority in Gauteng after the 29th of May 2024? It's an absolute yes from me. It could, and dare I say, I've already taken a bet that indeed it shall. Aye, yeah.